Hello, all. Welcome. You are listening to the Direct Shift Stories podcast, and this is episode one. I'm Raj Misa, and I'm joined today by our CEO, Vamshi Krishna Gunukula, as he interviews Veenu from Veenu Inspires. For over 17 years, Veenu Keller has worked with teens and adults to inspire them to believe in themselves and to know they always have a choice. Vinu has spent the last 2 decades working with at risk teens, children with disabilities, and parents of children with behavioral issues. Vinu has been the keynote speaker of school and teen events, and she also has been the headliner for the Rise Above tour dedicated to empowering teen women. Thank you, Vamshi, and thank you, Vinu. Vamshi, you can take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Welcome all. This is a great honor to really be interviewing and talking to Veenu today. It just serves our mission at Direct Shifts to bring to the world clinical providers and make sure the employers and the patients have better access to medical providers. So I am extremely honored today to bring to you our first story in the mental health and the behavioral health space, which, as you all know, has become very, very evident and very important. So without much further ado, I would like to present Veenu for you all today. Veenu, would you please start with just introducing yourself and telling us more about how did your journey actually start and into helping thousands and potentially millions of people?
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to be here. And especially right now with where the world is, how are we supporting each other as parents, as kids, and understanding what we're all feeling? And, my journey did start out with mental health. As a young child, I had some issues with suicidal tendencies. I was in a psychiatric care hospital for 2 months when I was little. I used to cut, and they wanted to diagnose me with all these, depression, anxiety, and it wasn't about the titles. It was, and I felt as a child that these titles kept me in a cage, and nobody was asking me the right questions to really help and see really what was going on, what was creating this depression. And it's not always a chemical imbalance. There's a lot of times that mental health is a chemical imbalance, and I don't want to take anything away from that. There's 5 axes that we actually look at, and we have to see, is it a personality? Is it more of a medical? Where is this stemming from? But for me on my journey, I realized that at such a young age that somehow, some way I wanted to help people. And I was on this journey to be a psychologist. And my life kind of detoured since, we all wear masks. And I was a director of a mental health institute where I live here in North Carolina. And I was still having these suicidal tendencies. Like, I still felt like life was over and I needed to just raise the 2 kids that I had. I had gone through a divorce. I had 2 young boys at the time who are now adults. And I ended up going to a personal growth seminar in 2007 in Atlanta, Georgia. And to be honest, that changed my life. It brought me to a time in my life that I realized that everything that we do in our life is an absolute choice. We have a choice to live, and we have a choice not to. We have a choice to make our life better, and we have a choice not to. It's how do we want to define what our world is? And so it was interesting because the more I related to this, the more I decided that I didn't want to die. I was no longer suicidal. I got off all my antidepressants. I got off my Xanax. I got off everything. I stopped smoking. I stopped drinking, because I think a lot of people do self-medicate through those things, because they want to find that balance. They want to know that they're normal. They're looking for normal. And I think that when I started to realize that everything I went through in my life was just a story, and the ending of the story hadn't been written yet, that's when I started to detour and take a different step in my life. As a matter of fact, going into these homes, working with these children with developmental disabilities and all these behaviors, I remember a family specifically right before Christmas, they found out that their daughter had Q22. And they were crying, they were sobbing. And, I went to their house to work with their daughter, teaching her how to talk, teaching her, how to meet all her milestones at her age level. And we got faced with this, and I took the book out of their hand, and I said, this is the book that they gave you. This is how they define it through their stories. What if we just put this book away and we wrote your daughter a new story? And I'm going to tell you that, I think she's like 14, 15 years old now. She's been mainstreamed. She's met all her developmental milestones. She's age appropriate. There's some things with her heart that obviously, no matter what you do, it's a medical condition that she needs work with. But other than that, all her behaviors we changed. We met all her developmental milestones because it was just changing the parent's mind, a mind shift of let's write our own story. And that's what we did.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So your personal experience and your personal journey has become your motivation. I mean, how many people there are that have the opportunity to turn their personal journey into becoming something greater, but you have done it, and that's a great example. So tell us more about where should one start in seeking the help. Most of the times, as you have seen young adults, children going through this, and some of them may not have the grit to go all the way and then recognize that there is a solution. Some of them might not have that grit. So where and when should they actually start to try and seek help?
The moment you realize something's not right. As a mom, it's a gut instinct sometimes. I mean, I would say all the time, like even all the clients I work with, like the parents will, if you look at the history, they'll say, I always knew like there was just something off or something wrong, something didn't add up, and then they thought, oh, well, but you're not supposed to compare your kids, right? Like kids learn things at different things. And then you have like, family telling you this and family telling you that, like, oh, they're outgrow it. It's okay. And so stop listening to everybody, and just, if there's something that is a red flag to you, it's not going to hurt you to investigate it. Worst case scenario, you're right. It's absolutely nothing. The best case scenario, you find out, and that's why I love early intervention. You got it at a time where you have an opportunity to change it.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's well said. Early intervention. So right now, as we see it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there is coaching that they can actually seek. But there is also specific medical help that they can actually seek. And then there is something in between, therapies, and, which also is sometimes covered by their medical insurances, sometimes not, etc. There are different kinds of help that they can seek. Is there an approach that the general population, general people can actually follow to define what should they actually reach out to depending on what they're experiencing?
I think coaching is so new that I don't feel the medical field is even, referring them to coaching. I think that most people, especially with mental health, the first place to talk to is your doctor, your pediatrician. That would be the first place to check in. Even with my own kids, like my own kids have, I have 6 kids, and 3 of them have dyslexia. 3 of them have ADHD, and I never self-diagnose them. Like that is beyond me. I'm not somebody to diagnose. Do I have the tools to work with them? Yes. But the first place I checked with was my pediatrician. I said, as a parent, as a professional who's in the field, there's some red flags and we need to start monitoring it. And then after that, I took them to a psychologist. I got them tested. I did get the diagnosis. And again, diagnoses aren't bad. It kind of gives you the reason why. What makes diagnosis bad when we think that, oh, this is a diagnosis, here's the magic pill and they're going to be better. That's why I feel we need to take the labels off. We need to get to the cause. If the cause is dyslexia, great. They have dyslexia. If its cause is ADHD, great. They have ADHD. What do we want to do about it? How are we going to use behavior modification, and what is needed? And I'll tell you, even as a coach, if I get a client who's 13 and suicidal, that is really my niche. suicide, cutting, bullying, any type of self-worth, self-esteem issues. That's why I have that book, Teach Your Children They're Enough, because it starts with the parenting and how do we give our kids this self-worth and self-esteem at such a young age? How do we implement it? But I'm going to be honest with you. There's times I get on the call and I tell the parents, I'm like, they need a therapist first before coaching. They really need to see a licensed therapist who's able to diagnose, who's able to look at the big picture. And there's so many different types of therapy now, CBT, like all these different types of therapies out there. I can't even keep up with them. And when I say coaching is different from therapy, I spent 10 years in therapy and I loved my therapist. She was a licensed psychotherapist. I saw her every week. And yet I still stayed suicidal. I still stayed depressed. I still stayed with anxiety. It wasn't until I decided to redefine what my life meant and make changes and get a coach that took me out of the story of depression, out of the story of anxiety, taught me how to cope with things that came into my world. I'm no longer on medication. I don't even go by that diagnosis. I am not depressed. I am not anxious. Like, I don't need those labels in my life because they don't serve me. And so I just feel that there's a time for doctors, there's a time for therapists, there's a time for psychiatrists. Like, I would never say, oh, choose a coach over that. Because sometimes it's not about coaching. Sometimes you need the medical professionals. Mm-hmm. And as a coach, my degree is in psychology. I was a certified mental health professional, and I decided to go with coaching. And I feel I get great results with my families because they've probably already seen a therapist. I'm going to be honest, most of them have seen therapists and psychologists and all that. I get them after they've done all that. And now what's next? And basically I'm asking them the questions nobody used to ask me when I was younger. What was missing in my life? What made me feel lonely? What created me to go into the depression where nothing was great? So if everything is bad, you can't see good. And, one of the things that I have learned over the years is what is wrong is always available, but so is what's right.
That's well said. That's well said. I'm going to probably steal that from you. What's wrong is always available. And so is what's right. Absolutely. That's great. So tell us a little more about, how you practice coaching. Like, for example, social determinants of health, socioeconomic factors effect on health, and cultural effect on health. That is becoming more and more apparent now as medicine really sees multiple avenues to cure and heal patients. So how do you factor in all those things in your coaching? And do you really think those factors are being considered enough in the current medical therapy and coaching field, or should the providers be doing more?
So I personally, and I think it's a personal opinion, right? I think it's a personal thing of do our kids need medication to be better? If they're diabetic, would you give them insulin? Absolutely. My kids have ADHD. They have thrived off ADHD medication and they're on the lowest dose. But I'm going to be honest, it took me a long time to wrap my head, because I was so anti-medicine. I was like, nope, I can do it through behavioral modification. I can make the difference in them. And yet the growth that my 8-year-old twins made in 6 months after putting them on medication was beyond anything, and they went from a preschool reading level to a second grade reading level in 6 months. And so, my personal belief is you don't need meds. But then when I've done it with my own kids, I'm like, oh, maybe sometimes you do, So I feel like we're always shifting on what we believe. I do believe that diet plays a big role into it. When we're looking at the world today, the stresses that it plays on our health, even as adults, our cortisol levels are up. We're depleted. We're in adrenal fatigue, because we're pushing. We're trying to be happy, but people don't know what happiness is. I don't feel that because I was on antidepressants, and that's not what helped me. I was on antidepressants. I was still suicidal, and I was still depressed. It's when I got off of that, I shift my mindset. I changed my life. I created a plan. I had a coach that helped me create the plan, the strategy to figure out what I wanted. And I closed that gap. And I think that's why I chose coaching. I think that that's why I did not pursue my psychology after my bachelor's degree. I just like, you know what, I'm going to do coaching. I got trained in it. I'm a trainer for a huge speaker of the world that I continue to learn from and grow from and understand the strategies that he teaches to get that mind shift. And I get the results. And the downfall of coaching is it's not covered by insurance. It's an out-of-pocket cost. So when I do get the clients that like you've been recommended to us, we know that you can help with these behaviors, whether it's autism, Down syndrome, or just like people want to label the ODD, the oppositional defiance disorder, and they can't afford it because it's insurance don't cover it. I mean, I definitely recommend them go to your psychologist or go to your doctor, get the mental health that your insurance will cover, because some help is better than no help.
Got it. Yeah.
And that's what parents need to realize. Parents need to realize, do something instead of doing nothing.
Correct. Absolutely. Yep. And, just a little bit of a thought about what we do. We are constantly striving at Direct Shifts to make access to care better for patients through making sure provider organizations always have healthcare professionals available to them, because most of the times, remote places, they don't have the right healthcare professionals. So the best way to improve access is to make sure healthcare professionals are available to the organizations that want to provide that care. So from a mental health perspective, behavioral health, mental health therapy sessions, or psychologists or coaching, etc., do you think there is enough work being done to improve that access? Or first of all, what are the challenges in terms of access for patients, and how should patients from their side or other organizations, just your personal view on how is the access shaping up?
So I'm going to be totally honest. And so I left mental health because it was, instead of adding more availability, they were taking it away. There was a time that somebody can get 10 hours of what was called CBRS provider. So you had a provider that would go into the homes and work with the kids or work with the adults or whatever. And then they took that away and they're like, oh, only HRI, which is the high risk intervention where you needed a degreed person to do it, a mental health professional to do it. So then we would do that. But then our hours got taken away from us because the state said, no, we're not going to pay for that. Then it was just case management. Well, what does case management do? You go into the home, you see that they're suffering, you make sure that they're going to their doctors that just keep giving them meds and meds and meds. But there's no behavior modification with it. There's no one teaching them the life skills, the self-care that they need to learn. Medication wouldn't be so bad if there was also behavior modification with it, and just use medication as a tool, not as an answer. And I'm just being honest. This is my real raw opinion. And that's why I left mental health. I'm done. I don't want to do mental health anymore, because instead of giving access to what is needed, we've taken it away now. And I don't know if that's just my area here in North Carolina. I don't know if that's the world, but I mean, even talking to other friends that have kids with special needs or whatnot, they said, no, it's everywhere. Like, it's unaccessible, and insurances don't want to pay it. I know, like with even my insurance, like they were like, oh, we're going to change your meds. We're going to put you on the generic. And I'm like, but the generic doesn't work. And they're like, oh, well, sorry, that's all we got for you. Like, so you want me to take something that doesn't work for me? Or their answer was, oh, no, you just keep trying different ones that work. I'm not a lab experiment here. I'm a human being. We know it works. So why would you take that access away from me? So when you're asking about this, it's the insurance companies that are taking it away from us. It's the states that are taking it away from us. And then it trickles all the way up to the government. What is accessible anymore? I don't know. But I do know that if you Google life coach, you'll find a bazillion of them. Why? Because we don't take insurance. So we're not, put in a bubble that you can only work with me if this insurance company pays me. It's either you find what you can do. And when people say, well, I can't afford it, you can afford it. You always can afford it. You just got to find and be resourceful to afford it. And you got to say, is it worth it to you? Is it worth giving up the cable, the junk food, to have that extra money to pay for a coach? or go without. And then, people rather sit in their story that I'm suffering and there's no help. Help is always available.
Yeah.
Help is always available. You just got to use your resources to find it. And I think that the question is like, how are people accessing this, And that's a great question. I mean, now that they're taking so much away from us through the insurance companies and through mental health, that's a great question. And that's what I would say, start with your doctor. Start with your physician.
No, I think that's well said, because, there should be more work done in making mental health more accessible versus the other way around. That's, I think, well said. And I think mental health as a practice, maybe psychologists, therapists, social workers, has to be more encouraged. And I'm going to ask you some questions about how has the pandemic really revealed a lot of this. But I think you very well said it. It has to be more encouraged. But before we go into what are the new trends that have emerged, that lack of better access for mental health, do you think coaching can actually help fill some of those gaps so that they have some help versus no help, and then potentially that can reduce their reliance on completely bigger mental health and early interventions from a coaching perspective? Do you think can help fill the gap of this lack of access?
Absolutely. What I would love to see, and when you guys contact me, I'm like, what a great opportunity for these big companies to contract with a coach that understands these different aspects of, closing the gap. What is it that you're looking for? Not here to diagnose, but to really get in and work with their employees. It's just like some companies will hire a personal trainer, right? And they come in and they're like, we're hiring this personal trainer. You guys need to show up. And this personal trainer is going to help us because we need to get our physicality right. There was a time that the world's like, oh, we need to get physically right. So people were hiring, these physical fit trainers to come into their, Google and all these places. We need to get our mind right. These companies need to hire us coaches. Don't rely on your employees to do it, because what they make in this world, they can't afford that every day from us. But the companies that can use it as a tax write-off for their employees, give it to them as a benefit. For the benefit, we had a group of 5 coaches that each of you guys get, every month you get 1 hour of coaching a month. Like, even that, can you imagine that it's not sitting in your story about what's wrong? It's getting you out of what's wrong to see what's right and how to close that gap.
Yep.
Imagine what that would do for employees, the turnover, the productivity of these. And it doesn't matter what business you own, whether it's a medical, pharmacy, clinician, it's how are we cultivating the relationship with the employees, with the people, the patients, whatever it looks like. And yes, so coaching can close that gap.
Yep. That's a great point that you have brought up. There are newer models that are emerging, as you might very well know, direct to employer primary care. Employers insurance are for people through employers still is the largest way for people to get insurance. And employers very much have the responsibility and authority and capability to make this proactive care available, physical care as well as mental care. So that's actually well said. I think there is a lot of such need for such models for employers to intervene and make available to their employees, maybe a manufacturing company, a medical devices company, or a transportation company, you name it. Yep, that's actually very well said. So, going a little bit into the newer trends that are emerging, we are seeing now, because of the pandemic, because of lockdowns or various reasons, unemployment or fear of what's going to happen, mental health issues have risen. There is data to support that. And now organizations are looking at, okay, how should that be better provided? The organizations are looking at how to combine behavioral health right at the primary care, how to make behavioral health resources accessible to the primary care doctors. So a lot of those things are evolving now, predominantly because of what the pandemic has shown or what the pandemic has done. Mm-hmm. What, in your opinion, should happen so that a lot of these things don't reverse course. Like this pandemic will be over. As a human species race, we are very resilient. This pandemic will be behind us. There is no doubt. But after this is behind us, what learnings should organizations like big employers, payers, providers, healthcare organizations should take from this to make that proactive mental healthcare, behavioral healthcare, or life coaching, make it more accessible and available? What should they be doing?
Well, first of all, we need to find the gift of the pandemic, the gift of learning that fear will either stop us or it will push us forward, and in doing so, how are we mentally preparing everyone in the world for such a loss? We took people living in abundance to people living in scarcity. People that even had abundance were going back into scarcity. Look at the stock market, how it dropped. I got to take my money out, because everybody was living in scarcity. If everybody just left everything, the stock market would never have dropped. Right? But everybody started pulling their money out. So that's what happens, right? When the stock market drops. And then, but if you built a foundation in your company of appreciation, gratitude, mindset, seeing that there are no problems, there's only opportunities. What could we create going forward? But if we look at this as just a pause in our life, for a big pause, right? A year pause, we don't know when it's going to be done. So either we're going to sit and wait for it to be done, or we're going to get out and do something. And that's what we need to start looking at, is like, we're all waiting. Stop waiting. Don't wait for the light at the end of the tunnel. Go create that light. And that's the same attitude we need to bring into businesses. We need to bring into, why the heck why can we not find toilet paper again? You know what I'm saying? Like, come on. Out of all the resources, we need that much toilet paper? So when you ask me that question, it's really going back to mindset. It's going back to personal growth. It's getting back to, what is our foundation? One of my mentors, Tony Robbin, says, if there's a crack in the foundation, your whole house is going to come tumbling down. So I feel like COVID gave us an opportunity to find out where are our cracks, and the time to start mending the cracks and fixing them to make it better. I'm constantly saying with customer service, y'all need to hire a coach, because your customer service is supposed to service the customers. But when they're rude and they're more about protecting the company, you're not going to have a company protect, because you're not going to have any more customers. They need coaching. They need coaching on the different personalities that we all have. I'm certified in the DISC personality modality. And I realized that when somebody has a different personality and we portray what our personality is, because that's how our brain sees it, and there's miscommunication and there's conflict, it's not because one person was right or wrong. It's because we had different personalities, and the way I presented it did not coincide with your personality and the way you needed to receive it. But again, can you imagine if you had a hiring process and you put everybody through the DISC personality, and you started to realize, like, yeah, that person's good there. Oh, that person's not good there. Don't put them in sales. They don't have an I in them. Do not put them in sales, because we're not going to make our sales. And I mean, and there was a company that actually hired me to come do this for every one of their employees. They're like, we don't care about the cost. We care about the value of our company. I did it on 10 of their employees and the bosses. And it was amazing, where they had to make little shifts. And once they did, how amazing their company is now. Just by understanding people's personalities and why one was communicating this way, one was communicating that way, and understanding fears and what people need. See, a behavior is simply a need that's not being met. Whether you're at your job, your home, or relationships. So when a behavior shows up and it continues to show up, it's because that person's getting that need met. How amazing if you knew what that need was. they wouldn't have the behavior anymore. And that goes with parenting, that goes with your kids, that goes with your employees.
Got it. Got it. No, that's well said. The behavior is just a need that's not met. So just to continue on your point, to propagate these messages about coaching for better behaviors, the need for coaching, the behaviors could be at a company, the behaviors could be consumer behaviors or personal behaviors. We know there is a lot of seniors that are struggling with respect to medication adherence, with respect to finding the right care. Sometimes it is behavior driven as well. So they might need more coaching to make sure their fears are reduced.
Absolutely.
So,
get a coach and put them in your customer service. So like if your customer service can't do it, you got a coach to bring their, when emotions high, your intellect's low. That's a Tony quote. When your emotions are high, your intellect's low. So when somebody is frustrated that their needs do not get met and they're upset and they're angry, the worst thing you can do is tell somebody, I understand, but. You don't understand if you're saying but.
yeah.
Because all you're doing is protecting your company now. That's when you need a coach that you send all these people to so they can de-escalate the problem, get to what the cause is, and give the company an opportunity to solve and resolve.
Got it. Got it. Yep. Great point. As an individual, we also know that you are a prolific writer, not just a practitioner of coaching, but you're also a prolific writer. And you're trying to get your message out there all the time through speaking, writing. And we personally feel, at Direct Shifts, the more people speak about coaching, behavior change, behavioral health, mental health, the more the organizations will hear about it, the more the decision makers will hear about it. So tell us more about what is happening in this space. You are writing things individually, but are there associations that are standing up for this? Are there organizations that are also trying to make the case? What else is happening that our viewers and people that we work with should know and should support?
Well, so I know that there's many speakers out there that have many great programs, and I'm not here to sell Tony Robbins, but I know that Tony Robbins has a huge arena for business, for personal growth. I know lots of Fortune 500 companies send their employees actually to Tony's stuff, especially virtual. They're virtual now. So, you buy a ticket and you got your office listening to it, right? So it's even more powerful now because you can get more involved to heal. And that's what I love about Tony is that he's all about ending suffering. And especially right now, we're suffering. We're in an area of suffering. And, as Tony says, you can choose to suffer, you can choose a beautiful state, but you got to understand the difference. And so, it just depends on what you're looking for and these companies are looking for. There's tons of people out there that are teaching the right things, and they're doing it in mass now. Like, get your people out there, get your companies out there, invest in them, because if you're investing in your people that work for you, they're going to give back to you, which gives back to the consumer, which keeps your company alive and thriving.
Yeah. That's a great point. So what you're saying is there are a lot of groups out there, there are a lot of organizations out there that are speaking about this. So one has to make an effort to go find out what that is, etc. And are these organizations are also, like, for example, taking a step back, I saw so many letters out there that were written to have a nurse in the COVID task force of the new government, of the President-elect Biden's new task force. They have written saying we need a nurse there because the organizations felt that a nurse was missing, and then they wrote, and then they finally, have a nurse now sitting as a part of the COVID task force. So like that, I feel, all the organizations, associations that you're talking about, all these prominent influencers, should be out there talking about, frankly, what should the new government, new administration be doing to make coaching and mental health more accessible.
Yes. And allow insurance companies to pay us, because we're more in numbers. But I also think there needs to be some type of, if not licensure, something, right? Because everybody wants to go to one event and say, I'm a coach, I'm a coach, I'm a coach. So I feel like there has to be a standard, because, just like therapists, you got great therapists that give you a great name, and then you got some that aren't so great that give therapists a bad name. So it's the same thing. I feel like there has to be a standard. If we're going to raise the bar where insurance companies acknowledge us, then I think that we need to have a standard that we have to meet. Like I'm a certified coach. I took time, I got schooling, I have a bachelor's degree. Like I have different education behind me that if somebody said you need to sit for a state board and these are the questions for coaching, I could probably do it today. There has to be something if we're going to be seen as the professional. I just don't feel like coaches are seen that way right now. And so people come up, oh, I'm an executive coach, I'm this. It doesn't matter what you are. There's no licensure right now, so we're not seen as the professional, and yet that it doesn't stop me. I have lots of clients, I get the results, and, the best compliment I ever get is another referral, right? So I just feel like at this point in our life that coaches are so much more accessible now than getting into a doctor, because we can do it this way. I don't need to take your weight. I don't need to take your blood pressure. I don't need to know what medications you're on. I just need you to know that you're willing and you want to change. That's all I need to know.
Perfect. That's great. I'm glad you mentioned this, because that's a nice segue into what I was going to ask you to speak about next, which is, you mentioned now it is virtual. You are able to provide, a lot of organizations are able to buy a ticket and has access to the entire office, to the coach. It's virtual, So I personally believe virtual should make the access more easy, should make the access better, than before. What should people seeking coaching do in order to now, gain advantage from this virtual care, virtual coaching that is available? What should they be doing? And how has it made your opportunity to reach out to more people seeking such care, such coaching? How has it provided that advantage to you? Can you speak a little about how virtual should be adapted more in order to provide more access to this?
Yeah, and yes, and I'll say this, it also goes back to your question about like, what do we need to learn from this, moving forward, because one day COVID's going to be over. Let's not lose what we have learned from COVID, that businesses can succeed virtually now. My kid's doctor's appointment, do you know how great it is that when they get home from school, I don't have to rush in the car, take them 25 minutes down to the road to the doctor, wait in a patient room for another hour, then finally be seen. And then I get to do it by camera. I go check their weight. I give them the weight. I have their temperature taken at home. I give them the temperature, and we see the doctor like this. This is what we do not need to let go of. How many speakers now are touching millions of lives because it's a virtual? We cannot lose sight of what virtual has given us. And I understand people miss the touch. Humans need touch. I get that. So I'm not saying let's just stay virtual. I'm just saying, how do we commingle that? For me as a coach, I've always been virtual. As a matter of fact, though, I used to do it by phone, and COVID got me doing more Zoom because people wanted that connection so bad, right? So they were able to, go into Zoom and see us. And so now I do all my coaching through Zoom. So I got off the phone and I got to see people now.
Got it. So from a primary care perspective, as you said, office visits are different now. You can do it via Zoom, a lot of other telemedicine opportunities. And sometimes when you need the testing, you go in and you do that. From a coaching perspective, can everything be virtual? Or coaching or mental health, can everything be virtual? Yeah. Are there instances where people may need to take some tests, or you still need to see them?
No, for me personally, because I have a program where I actually move in with families for 4 days. And my picture of my moment of getting to speak in front of thousands and thousands of people.
Hey.
When I move in with families, it's not something that I can actually do virtually. Like I cannot do my 4-day in-home turnaround virtually. Like that would not work, because in my program, I live with the family. Like, I don't stay in a hotel. Like, I sleep in their home because I want to see everything going on, even behind the scenes. So there is no time to, oh, I'm going to pretend I'm okay, when it's not okay. So for me personally, I need to be able to go into people's homes. But my one-on-one coaching is definitely virtual. And so after I go into the homes and I do the coaching to make sure the changes that we made in those 4 days are sustainable, I do that coaching virtually. But COVID hasn't stopped me though. Like, I still have families that I go, I wear my mask, I take precaution. I mean, the thing about airlines right now is that they're very, and that's the other thing. After we get done with COVID, airlines need to stay this clean. They need to stay this clean. And we still need social distancing when we're getting on and off the plane, please. But, there's protocols with the family before I come, make sure, are you guys doing your best to, stay put and not put yourself out there in big groups and stuff? I just finished an event in Florida and I'm not going in big groups right now. Like, even my coaching clients that I would see, because I have a few that I see that are local, I'm not doing them face-to-face right now because I just want to make sure that I'm good for 14 days before I'm putting myself out there physically, in front of people where there's not social distancing or something. So, I feel like it's just taking precaution. And, but most of my coaching is definitely virtual. It's just the in-home turnarounds that are definitely not virtual. And we've tried. So, but what I have done is I've made a 6-week online program that I'm getting ready to drop coming in the next couple weeks. So I've kind of taken my 4-day in-home turnaround and I've kind of put it in 6-week course where people can, do their own type of in-home turnaround, like to dissect things, like see what type of parenting am I, how are my parenting behaviors? What are my kids' behaviors saying? And really looking at how do I make my kid feel safe so they stay open and they want to talk to me, my book that, that I've written that's, teach your children that they're enough, it's all in that course. If we want to see our future better, then we got to start taking care of our children better. We got to start, not blaming and shaming them. We've got to start teaching them how to celebrate their wins. Even though it may not be a win to you, if it's a win to your kid, let's celebrate it. We got to start asking our kids more of what they want and need versus us assuming that as the parent, oh, they need that.
Yep. That's a great point that you brought up, which probably will be one of my last few questions. By the way, I can go on. It's a pleasure speaking with you. I've learned so much. I can go on and on. I would probably some last few questions. This early intervention and pediatric mental health or pediatric coaching and all these things, you have laid so much importance on it. There still seems to be a myth or a perception in the community that when you have a physical symptom, it's okay to take you to a doctor or to a care provider. But even after you have seen a mental symptom, there is still a fear and a shame aspect of it to really go seek the right care, especially, from a pediatric population. I'm sure when you compare the number of pediatric providers in mental health and coaching space versus adult providers, I'm sure there is a disproportionate of providers in the adult space, even though there is a huge pediatric population that may be facing those kinds of problems. So what would your recommendation to parents be to make sure that the shame and fears, all these things are minimized?
So the shame and fear comes from a self-proclaim that I have to do it right. And is it my fault? So we have to get rid of judgment. We have to get rid of judgment because our kids are not our measurement tool if we're doing it right. When you know something's not right with your child and you take them to a doctor, you're doing it right. Whether there's something wrong or not, it's just you went on an instinct. I think, with kids and coaching, what's great about kids and coaching is that there's not so much a stigma with coaching because everybody has a coach. I mean, actresses have coaches, there's so many coaches out there. And like coaching is not a stigma yet because coaching isn't like something's wrong. Coaching is how do you want to make it even better? So there's not much of a stigma with it. And so I feel like, with your answer is that for coaching, I feel like we have a better rap right now per se, because we're so new, like coaching is such a new concept, as far as, versus therapy. And with therapy though, I'm going to tell you, like, there's no shame in my game. If my son and daughter needed therapy, I'm doing it. My kids have tutoring. I'm doing it. My kids are on ADHD medicine. I'm doing it. And I don't allow somebody else's judgment to say if I'm right or wrong. I know I'm doing right by my kids. And I ask them all the time how they feel about it. I ask them what they need. And as long as I have that open communication, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I have older kids that have been arrested. I don't use that as like, oh, I'm a parent coach. How can, that is their choice. They've done something that was not right and they have their consequences. Not my deal. But what I have learned is not to blame and shame them for it. It's to say, what did you learn and what are you going to do better next time?
Yeah. Great point. Great point.
So there's a comment here. I have a 9-year-old cousin who's badly affected by lockdown, and he was constantly on mobile phone and watching TV, which affected his behavior. So what suggestions could you give to a parent to tackle this? Put boundaries. Okay. So right now, if we as adults are feeling like abandoned, that we don't get to have our social time with our friends and family, how do you think a 9-year-old child's dealing with it? And they can't express it because their brain is not developed like an adult. So it's going to come out as behavior. So in order to tackle that, and I would want to get more information, like I would need to know like some things that are happening more so than just that. But if we're just dealing with electronics, set boundaries, make their electronics be an award, make a reward, right? Like, you have done so good that, this is what you need. Also ask your kids, what are they getting from it? What are they getting from the TV or the interaction with, like I know I have a client who plays PlayStation a lot. It's not about the video game. It's because they have the interaction with somebody else their age in a different country, and it makes them feel their worth. That's why I wrote this book. And it's free ebook, by the way. Go to my website. It's veenuinspires.com/ebook. Go download this for free. You will have lots of strategies to help your child feel their worth so they don't have to keep going to the internet and connecting that way. There's so many ways our kids can connect. If we as parents can get resourceful for them and give them those connections, it will be so much easier for them. But you first, like I was just saying before, we can't assume what our kids need. We need to ask them, what do you need? What do you get from this? What does it feel like to have this time? Is TV a distraction so they don't have to think about what they're missing with their friends? What does TV mean to them? And that it starts with great questions.
Yep. Well said. Absolutely. Veenu, I think you really summarized the need for early intervention, the need for coaching, mental health and behavioral health be more recognized, the need for decision makers, may it be employers, payers, provider organizations, government, to make access to coaching and mental health and behavioral health more possible and more easier for organizations or for patients and people. And you mentioned that not everything needs to be treated by a pill. There are a lot of behavioral intervention techniques that can be used that have to be more accessible for people in order to perform better at a job or perform well in their life. A lot of these are great learnings for me, hopefully for all of our viewers. And we at Direct Shifts stand for making healthcare better, and making mental health and behavioral health more accessible is just a part of that mission. So any final comments to our viewers and to organizations out there that they should remember from this episode?
I just want people to realize that our mental health is our body, mind, and spirit. It's our body, mind, and soul. And we have to nourish it with the right nutrition, with our kids, with ourselves, exercise. And are there times for medication? yes, if someone's truly bipolar, it is a chemical imbalance. They need medication. So I don't want it to be misinterpreted that I'm like, no meds, because I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if there's a medical necessity because of a proven brain chemistry or whatnot, then I get it. And we don't always have to go to medication to see the change that we need to see in ourselves or our kids. It's a mind shift. It's knowing that if you want better, you got to do better.
Great. Well said. Thank you so much. Sharing stories from providers of care and coaching like you is just an honor. Thank you so much for sharing all your experience, your personal journey. It's definitely an inspiration for a lot of them. And I hope we have added some incremental value to your journey here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Raj, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Vamshi, and thank you, Veenu. Veenu, again, I can go yes, 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 like the way which is there in our DNA. Too many yeses. Thank you. Veenu, as a senior trainer coach, she would know again too many yeses from our past trainings, from our mentor. What does that mean? Vamshi, thank you so much for kicking start this particular first episode of Direct Shifts. And others who didn't catch this live, if you're hitting the replay, I would request you to please hit subscribe and also like, share, comment. And Veenu, we will also share you the complete recording and we'll put in the bites of this entire episode and share it with your community as well.
Beautiful.
It's a pleasure. And we will take forward this journey, Direct Shifts with Veenu Inspires. We'll take it forward for the betterment of the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.